Liam stood outside the oak-paneled study, the heavy door left carelessly ajar. It was a door he had paid for, in a house he had bought, yet in the 3 years of his marriage to Elena, he had never felt as if it were truly his. He was a guest here, a tolerated presence whose primary function was to fund a lifestyle he was never fully permitted to enjoy. Tonight, that illusion of tolerance was about to be shattered. He had set a test, a painful, desperate experiment to gauge the foundation of his marriage. And the results were coming in, delivered through the sliver of open air between the door and its frame. Elena's voice, usually a melody of cultured grace, was now a blade of cool, clinical precision. "No, the prenup is ironclad," she was saying, her tone stripped of all emotion. "My father made sure of that. The assets are clearly delineated. His premarital holdings are his. The joint accounts are minimal. And the house is technically in his name, but we can argue it was a marital gift intended to secure my station." A pause. Liam held his breath, his knuckles white where he gripped the cool brass of a nearby doorknob. He had told her he was fired 2 weeks ago. He had watched her face, a carefully constructed mask of sympathy that didn't quite reach her eyes. He had endured the pitying glances, the hushed phone calls, the subtle distancing. But this was different. This was strategy. "His earning potential is now negligible," Elena continued, and the words landed like stones in the silent hallway. "I need to move quickly. It's a matter of financial hygiene. To be tied to a failing asset is simply untenable. I need a clean break before he drags me down any further." Financial hygiene. The phrase echoed in the chambers of his heart, a sterile, corporate term for amputating a human being. It wasn't the talk of divorce that broke him. He had suspected it would come to this. It was the utter lack of humanity. It was the chilling realization that in her eyes, he wasn't a husband, a partner, a man she had once promised to love and cherish. He was a stock that had plummeted, a line item on a balance sheet that needed to be erased. He had faked being fired to test his wife, to see if the woman he loved was still in there, somewhere beneath the lacquer of status and expectation. And what he overheard her tell her lawyer didn't just break him, it vaporized the last shred of hope he had desperately clung to. In that moment, the test was over. The data was collected, and a quiet, cold resolve began to crystallize in his soul. They thought he was a failing asset. They had no idea he was the one who owned the entire market. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt completely and utterly underestimated in your own life? That feeling when people look at you and see only what they want to see, a fraction of who you truly are. If you have, this story is for you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy watching arrogance meet its match, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, because the reckoning for Elena and her family is just beginning. Liam had met Elena at a charity gala, one of those glittering affairs where people bid thousands on things they didn't need to prove they could. He was there as a quiet consultant for the hosting firm, a numbers guy in a well-tailored but unremarkable suit. She had drifted into his orbit like a star, radiant and seemingly warm. She was the daughter of Marcus Preston, a man whose name was synonymous with old money and ruthless corporate takeovers. Elena possessed all of her family's beauty and none of their overt harshness, or so he thought. She seemed intrigued by his quiet confidence, his lack of pretense. He didn't fawn over her name. He was interested in her thoughts on modern art, a subject she knew surprisingly little about, but was happy to be educated on. Their courtship was a whirlwind romance painted on a canvas of wealth. He was introduced to her family in their sprawling ancestral estate. Her father, Marcus, had appraised him with the cold eye of a man valuing livestock, his handshake firm but dismissive. Her mother, Beatrice, had smiled a smile that never touched her eyes, her questions about his background feeling more like an interrogation for a security clearance than a friendly chat. And her brother Julian, a smug investment banker who rode his father's coattails, had openly scoffed at Liam's job. "A financial analyst?" Julian had said, swirling his brandy. "So you, what, make spreadsheets for other people's money?" Liam had simply smiled. "Something like that. I find patterns others miss." Elena had been his defender then, a buffer against her family's sharp edges. "Julian, be nice," she chided gently. "Liam is brilliant." But even then, Liam noticed her defense was always soft, more for show than for substance. It was a performance of loyalty, not an act of it. He was, he realized, her one act of rebellion. The stable, intelligent, but ultimately middle-class man she had chosen over the parade of vapid heirs her parents had lined up. He was her project, a man whose potential she believed she could unlock and mold. The irony, which he kept locked away like a state secret, was that his potential had been realized long ago. The man they saw, the diligent analyst at a respectable but uninspired firm, was a carefully constructed fiction. It was a role he played to stay grounded, to remember where he came from. His real work, the work that had made him quietly, independently wealthier than the entire Preston clan, was done in the shadows under a company name they would never have heard of: Orion Strategy. He had built Orion from the ground up with a partner, a brilliant strategist named David Chen. They specialized in identifying undervalued companies, restructuring them from the inside out, and turning them into powerhouses. Liam was the architect, the man who saw the structural integrity or weakness in a company's financial bones. He had kept it a secret, initially out of a desire for privacy, and later, as he got to know the Prestons, as a form of self-preservation. He wanted Elena to love him, Liam, the man, not Liam, the hidden magnate. He wanted to believe her love wasn't transactional, so he proposed. She accepted, and he bought them a beautiful home in the city, a purchase that raised a few eyebrows from her family, but was explained away as a result of a lucky stock market run. They accepted it because it suited their daughter's needs. For 3 years, he played the part. He went to his modest office, listened to Julian's condescending stories about multi-million-dollar deals, and endured Marcus's patronizing advice about climbing the ladder. All the while, his own company was silently acquiring assets, growing in power, its shadow stretching longer and longer across the financial landscape. The idea for the test came to him after their 3rd anniversary dinner. Julian had spent the entire evening bragging about a new fund his bank, Sterling Preston Financial, was launching. He'd looked at Liam and said, "You should get in on the ground floor, Liam. It's probably the only chance you'll ever have to be part of something this big." Elena had laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated on Liam's nerves. It wasn't a laugh with him, it was a laugh at him, a shared joke with her brother at his expense. That night, as Elena slept, Liam lay awake, the question burning in his mind. If it all disappeared, would she stay? If the money, the house, the stability he provided were gone, would she still be there, holding his hand? Or would she, like her family, see him as nothing more than a failed investment? He had to know. So, he devised the plan. He would tell her his firm had massive layoffs. He was redundant. He was out. The test had begun. Her initial reaction was a portrait of practiced concern. "Oh, Liam, my darling, don't worry. We'll get through this. You're so talented, you'll find something else in no time." But her eyes were already calculating. And 2 weeks later, standing outside his own study, listening to her discuss his disposal in terms of financial hygiene, he finally had his answer. The love was a performance. The marriage was a transaction, and the bill was about to come due. The first family dinner after the firing was an ordeal designed for maximum humiliation. Marcus had summoned them to the Preston estate, a command disguised as a concerned invitation. The air in the cavernous dining room was thick with the scent of roasted duck and condescension. Beatrice presided over the table like a disappointed queen, her diamond necklace catching the light, each sparkle a tiny judgment. So Liam, Marcus began, foregoing any pretense of small talk as he sliced into his duck with surgical precision. Elena tells us you've hit a snag. Liam placed his fork down, meeting the older man's gaze without flinching. The firm downsized. My department was eliminated. Julian let out a small, derisive snort. Eliminated? Sounds like you were at the bottom of the food chain, mate. In my world, the top performers are never eliminated. They're protected assets. He leaned forward, a gleam of predatory delight in his eyes. That's the difference between creating value and just tracking it. Elena shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She looked at her plate, her cheeks flushed. She said nothing. Her silence was a roar in Liam's ears, a confirmation of her complicity. She was embarrassed, not for the way her family was treating her husband, but for her husband himself. Now, Julian, that's not helpful, Beatrice said, though her tone lacked any real conviction. She turned her gaze to Liam, a look of pity that was somehow more insulting than her son's open contempt. Liam, dear, perhaps this is a blessing in disguise. That little firm was never going to be your path to real success. Marcus and I were always concerned. We were, Marcus affirmed, pointing his knife at Liam as if punctuating a lecture. You're a smart boy, I'll give you that, but you lack ambition. You've been content to be a cog in a small machine. Now the machine has spit you out. It's time to think bigger. I'm exploring my options, Liam said, his voice a low, steady current in the turbulent room. Inside his jacket pocket, his fingers found the smooth leather of his small, personal journal. It was a habit he'd had for years, a place to jot down thoughts, observations, strategies. Tonight it felt like an anchor. He was mentally cataloging every word, every look, every nuance of their cruelty. Grievance number 1, Julian's food chain comment. Grievance number 2, Beatrice's feigned pity. Grievance number 3, Marcus's lecture on ambition. Grievance number 4, Elena's deafening, mortifying silence. Options? Julian laughed. What options does a mid-level analyst have in this market? It's brutal out there. I could maybe get you an interview for a junior position at my bank. It would be a step back, of course, a significant one, but you'd be associated with the Sterling Preston name. That has value in itself. The offer hung in the air, a poisoned piece of fruit. It wasn't an act of kindness, it was a power play. An opportunity for Julian to make Liam his subordinate, a daily reminder of his charity in Liam's failure. Thank you, Julian, Liam replied, his voice betraying no emotion. I'll keep that in mind. You should do more than keep it in mind, Marcus grumbled. Pride is a luxury for the successful, Liam. You're not in a position to have any. Your first priority should be to provide for my daughter. He looked at Elena, his expression softening slightly. She's accustomed to a certain standard of living. It would be unfortunate for her to have to make sacrifices because of your professional shortcomings. This was the core of it. The transactional nature of their world laid bare. Liam's value was directly tied to his ability to maintain Elena's lifestyle. His worth as a man, a husband, was irrelevant. He was a service provider, and his service had been interrupted. Elena finally looked up, meeting Liam's eyes for a fraction of a second. There was no apology in them, no spark of defiance on his behalf. There was only a quiet, desperate plea. Fix this. Don't make me look bad. Don't let this reflect on me. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a nod of agreement, it was a nod of understanding. He saw the situation with perfect, painful clarity. He was an outsider who had been temporarily granted entry to their gilded world based on a perceived utility. Now that utility was gone, and they were closing ranks, pushing him back out into the cold. The dinner ended with Beatrice offering to connect Liam with a headhunter who specializes in placing displaced executives. The condescension was a physical force pressing down on him, As he and Elena drove home in a car that suddenly felt too big, too expensive, the silence between them was a chasm. "They were just trying to help, you know," Elena said finally, her voice small. "Is that what they were doing?" Liam asked, his eyes fixed on the road. "My father can be blunt, and Julian, well, Julian is Julian. But they care about us, about our future." "They care about your future, Elena," Liam corrected her gently. "I'm just a variable in the equation, one that is currently underperforming." "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped, the facade of sympathy finally cracking to reveal the irritation beneath. "This is a difficult situation for me too. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is to have to explain this to people?" And there it was. Her primary concern was not his emotional state, not their partnership, but her own social standing. His job loss was an inconvenience, a stain on her perfect life. He didn't respond. He just drove, the city lights blurring past the window. Back at the house, he went to his study and took out his journal. He didn't write in anger. He wrote with the cold precision of an auditor documenting fraud. He detailed the entire conversation, the insults, the offers of pity, Elena's final, revealing words. He was no longer just running a test. He was building a case. The evidence was mounting, and the verdict was becoming inescapable. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in passive aggression and psychological erosion. Elena's initial, flimsy performance of support evaporated, replaced by a constant, low-grade hum of disappointment. She treated his unemployment not as a shared crisis to be weathered together, but as a personal failing of his that was actively inconveniencing her. Little comments, sharp as needles, became a part of their daily interactions. "I saw Clara today," she'd mentioned casually while scrolling through her phone. "Her husband just made partner. They're buying a place in the Hamptons." The unspoken comparison hung in the air between them. Her husband is a success. You are not. Liam, meanwhile, was living a double life. In the mornings, he would put on a pair of jeans and a simple shirt, the uniform of a man with nowhere to go. He would make coffee, read the news, and watch as Elena got ready for her day of lunches and gallery visits. Her every movement a subtle broadcast of her impatience with his idleness. "Do you have any interviews lined up today?" she'd ask, her tone suggesting the answer was already a foregone conclusion. "I've sent out a few more applications," he would reply, his voice calm and even. "It's a slow process." Her sigh would be his cue. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, Liam's day would truly begin. He would change into one of his custom-tailored suits, pick up a sleek briefcase, and take a car service, not from the front of his house, but from 2 blocks away, to a gleaming glass tower in the heart of the financial district. The minimalist, gold-plated letters on the lobby wall read, "Orion Strategy." The moment he stepped into his office on the 48th floor, the persona of the displaced executive fell away. Here he was not Liam the failure, but Liam Sterling, the co-founder and chief architect of one of the most successful and discreet strategic investment firms in the country. His office was a testament to his true nature: clean lines, understated elegance, and a panoramic view of the city that seemed to stretch to the horizon. It was a view that encompassed the much smaller, much brasher building of Sterling Preston Financial. "Morning, Liam," his partner David Chen said, walking in with 2 coffees. David was the public face of Orion, the charismatic negotiator. Liam was the quiet engine, the mind that saw the whole chessboard. "How's the airdrop into enemy territory going?" Liam took the coffee, a small smile touching his lips. "The natives are hostile. They seem to believe I'm a lower life form. Last night I was offered a junior position at a failing bank as an act of charity." David whistled. "Julian's place? Ouch. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife." He leaned against the edge of Liam's massive mahogany desk. "Speaking of which, the due diligence on Sterling Preston is complete. It's worse than we thought. They're over-leveraged. Their new fund is built on a house of cards, and Julian has been cooking the books on his performance reports for the last 2 years. The whole thing is a vanity project propped up by his father's reputation. Liam nodded slowly, absorbing the information. The board is getting nervous? Nervous is an understatement. They're looking for a white knight, an outside investor to come in, clean house, and stabilize the ship before it hits the iceberg. They're ripe for a takeover, Liam, a quiet, surgical acquisition. We can absorb their assets, jettison their toxic debt, and fold their client list into our portfolio. And the best part is, they have no idea we're the ones circling. They think we're just a boutique advisory firm. A plan, cold and intricate, began to form in Liam's mind. It was more than just business, it was becoming personal. He could save the company, but on his own terms. It would be the ultimate reversal. "Prepare a proposal, David," Liam said, his voice quiet but firm. "An aggressive one. I want controlling interest, and I want it to be anonymous until the final signing. Let their board think they're being rescued by an unknown entity." "Consider it done," David said with a grin. "This is going to be epic." Liam's day was filled with high-stakes negotiations, complex financial modeling, and billion-dollar decisions. He was in his element, a grandmaster moving pieces across a global board. Then at 4:30, he would pack his briefcase, take the car service back to his designated drop-off point, change back into his unemployed clothes, and walk through the front door of his house just as Elena was returning. The transition was jarring. He went from being a titan of industry to a man being admonished for leaving a coffee cup on the counter. One evening, the second major humiliation occurred. Elena had insisted they attend a cocktail party hosted by one of her family's friends. "We can't just disappear from the face of the earth, Liam," she had argued. "It looks suspicious. We have to maintain appearances." The party was a sea of glittering diamonds and brittle smiles. Liam felt like an exhibit at a zoo. People would approach him, their faces etched with a cloying, insincere sympathy. "Elena told us your news," one woman, a friend of Beatrice's, said, patting his arm. "So sorry to hear it, but don't you worry. A man like you will land on his feet." The implication was clear. A man like you, who managed to marry a Preston, must have something going for him, even if we can't see it. The worst moment came when a portly real estate developer, a man named Henderson, who was in Marcus Preston's inner circle, cornered him by the bar. "Tough break, son," Henderson boomed, clapping him hard on the shoulder. "Marcus was telling me, listen, I might have something for you. My son-in-law runs a car dealership, high-end imports. He's always looking for sharp guys in the finance office. It's not Wall Street, but it's a living. I could make a call." Liam stared at him. The man was offering him a job arranging car loans, and he was doing it with the magnanimous air of a king granting a peasant a plot of land. Before Liam could formulate a polite refusal, Elena was at his side, her fingers digging into his arm like talons. "Mr. Henderson, that's so kind of you," she said, her smile stretched tight across her face. "Liam has several things in the works, of course, but we appreciate you thinking of him." She pulled him away, her grip surprisingly strong. When they were out of earshot, she turned on him, her voice a furious whisper. "A car dealership? Are you kidding me? Do you see what you're reducing me to? Having to fend off charity offers from men like Henderson? Can't you at least look like you have prospects? Stand up straight, mingle. Don't just stand there looking like a lost puppy." He looked at his wife, at the sheer, unadulterated shame on her face. Shame for him, shame for herself for being associated with him. He said nothing. He simply absorbed the insult, filed it away in the meticulous ledger of his mind, and felt the last vestiges of warmth for her turn to ice. The test was yielding results more conclusive than he could have ever imagined. The atmosphere in the house grew colder, the silence stretching into a brittle, unbreachable wall. Liam and Elena moved around each other like ghosts, their conversations reduced to terse, logistical exchanges. "I'll be out late tonight, a charity committee meeting," she would announce, not looking at him. "Don't wait up." He knew these were often lies, thin excuses to have dinner with her family or friends without the baggage of her unemployed husband. He didn't challenge her. He simply watched, and he waited. His own secret life grew more intense. The acquisition of Sterling Preston Financial was moving faster than anticipated. David was a master negotiator, and the bank's board was growing more desperate by the day. They were bleeding investors, and the rumors of Julian's mismanagement were beginning to leak beyond the boardroom. Orion's strategy was positioned as the silent, powerful savior, the only entity capable of injecting the necessary capital and leadership to prevent a total collapse. The deal was being structured with such surgical precision that no one, not Marcus, not Julian, had any idea that the architect of their salvation and their comeuppance was the man they dismissed at their dinner table. One afternoon, Liam was in his home study, the one he was rarely allowed to use, which Elena had designated her personal office. He was looking for a book on architectural history when he noticed her laptop was open. He had never violated her privacy before, but a cold instinct guided him. He glanced at the screen. It was an email, open to her drafts folder. The recipient was a name he didn't recognize, but the subject line was Asset Allocation Strategy. He leaned closer. The email was a detailed list of her personal assets: jewelry, art, a trust fund her grandmother had left her. She was asking for advice on how to insulate these assets from any potential marital debt and ensure a clean separation of finances in the event of a dissolution. He felt a strange sense of detachment, like a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. He wasn't even angry anymore. He was just confirmed. He closed the laptop and backed away from the desk. He walked through the silent, opulent house he had paid for. He ran his hand along the cool marble of the kitchen island, a feature Elena had insisted on. He looked at the curated art on the walls, pieces she had selected. He saw it all now, not as a home, but as a stage set, a backdrop for the life she wanted to project to the world. He was just a prop in that production, and his role was being written out of the script. That evening, he tried one last time, a final, foolish attempt to see if there was anything left to salvage. He found her in the living room, reading a magazine. "Elena," he said softly, "we haven't had a real conversation in weeks. Can we just talk?" She looked up, her expression one of weary annoyance. "Liam, I'm really not in the mood. It's been a long day." "Let's go out," he suggested, "just the two of us. That little Italian place we used to go to when we were first dating. No pretense, just good food." She scoffed, a small, ugly sound. "That place? Liam, it's a trattoria. We can't be seen there. What would people think?" Then her eyes narrowed. "Besides, should you really be spending money on eating out right now? Shouldn't you be saving every penny?" The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She was simultaneously shaming him for his lack of status and for his perceived lack of funds. He was trapped in a cage of her making. "You're right," he said, his voice flat. It was a silly idea. He retreated to his own space, which had become a small guest room at the end of the hall. He took out his leather-bound journal. He opened it to a fresh page and wrote at the top, "Final log." He didn't list grievances anymore. Instead, he began to write a sequence of events, a plan of action. He detailed the final steps of the acquisition. He outlined a series of phone calls he would make. He wrote down names, account numbers, legal clauses. It was a declaration of independence, a strategy for his own liberation. As he wrote, a sense of profound calm settled over him. The pain was still there, a deep, resonant ache, but it was no longer chaotic. It had been forged into something hard and clear. Purpose. He was no longer a husband trying to save his marriage. He was a man preparing to reclaim his life. The quiet before the storm was over. The first drops of rain were beginning to fall, and he knew that when the tempest finally broke, it would wash everything away, leaving only the truth standing in its wake. He closed the journal and placed it in the inner pocket of his jacket, where it rested against his chest like a piece of armor. He was ready. The moment arrived on a Tuesday evening. It was a quiet night, the kind of domestic tranquility that can only be manufactured by two people who have nothing left to say to each other. Liam was in the living room, ostensibly reading a book, but in reality, he was listening. He was listening to the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of traffic outside. He was listening for the signal, the event that would trigger the endgame. It came in the form of Elena's retreating footsteps as she walked towards the study and closed the door. But not quite completely. A sliver of sound escaped. He waited a full minute, his heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. Then he rose and walked silently down the hall, his stockinged feet making no sound on the polished hardwood floors. He stopped just outside the study door, positioning himself in the shadows, an observer at his own execution. Elena's voice was low, but in the stillness of the house, every word was perfectly clear. She was on the phone. "I've reviewed the documents you sent over," she said. "It all seems straightforward." A pause. Liam could picture her, sitting behind the large mahogany desk, her posture perfect, her expression cool and professional. She was closing a deal. The deal was her marriage. "So, to confirm," she continued, "once I file, his assets will be frozen pending the division. But as we discussed, he has no significant assets to speak of, apart from his now-defunct severance package. The house is the only major point of contention." Liam leaned his head against the cool wall, closing his eyes. He had known this was coming. He had seen the emails. He had felt it in the icy distance between them. But hearing the words spoken aloud, with such dispassionate clarity, was different. It was the final nail. "My father's lawyers are confident," Elena said. "They believe we can argue that since the house was purchased after our marriage, for the express purpose of maintaining my standard of living, I have a majority claim regardless of whose name is on the deed. He won't have the resources to fight it. He'll have to settle." He won't have the resources to fight it. She was so sure. Her entire family was. Their confidence was absolute, built on a foundation of arrogance and a complete, willful ignorance of who he truly was. They had never bothered to look beneath the surface, to ask the right questions, to see the man instead of the convenient story they had told themselves. Their blindness was his greatest weapon. Then came the phrase, the one that had echoed in his memory since he'd first heard it, the one that had solidified his resolve. "Absolutely," Elena said to the lawyer on the other end of the line. "The sooner we can finalize this, the better. It's a matter of financial hygiene. I need to detach from him completely before he drags me down." That was it, the final piece of data. Liam took a deep, steadying breath. The hurt was still there, a raw nerve, but it was overshadowed by a profound, chilling clarity. The woman he had loved was gone, if she had ever existed at all. In her place was a stranger, a cold-eyed strategist who saw their life together as a failed merger to be dissolved. He felt a strange, sad pity for her. She was so trapped in her world of status and appearances that she had sacrificed her own humanity for it. He pushed himself off the wall. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. He was not going to storm in, yelling and accusing. That's what they would expect. That would be an emotional outburst, a sign of weakness. He was going to do this on his terms, with the same cold precision she was applying to his destruction. The test was over. The time for observation was past. Now it was time for the presentation of the findings. He waited until he heard the click of her phone being placed back in its cradle. He gave it another 10 seconds, letting the silence settle in the room. Then, he pushed the door open and stepped inside. Elena looked up, startled. A flicker of guilt, or perhaps just surprise, crossed her features before being quickly suppressed, replaced by a mask of cool indifference. "Liam, I was just finishing up some work." He didn't respond to her lie. He walked slowly towards the desk, his eyes never leaving hers. He stopped on the other side of it, creating a barrier between them. The desk where she had just plotted his financial ruin. "Financial hygiene, Elena?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost conversational, but it cut through the silence like a shard of glass. "Is that what I am to you? A line item to be sanitized?" The color drained from her face. Her carefully constructed composure shattered in an instant. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She was caught, utterly and completely. How did you?" she stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. "The door was open," he said simply. "You should be more careful when discussing the dismantling of a man's life. Sound travels." She tried to recover, to rally her defenses. "You were eavesdropping? That's a violation of my privacy." A humorless smile touched Liam's lips. "Is it? More of a violation than consulting a lawyer to strip your husband of his home and assets behind his back? We seem to have different definitions of privacy, you and I. Yours involves secrecy. Mine involves a basic level of human decency, which has been in short supply around here lately." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the small leather journal. He placed it on the desk between them. It landed with a soft, definitive thud. "What is that?" she asked, eyeing it with suspicion. "It's a ledger," he said. "I'm a numbers guy, remember? I track things, and I've been tracking our marriage, specifically its decline. I've logged every insult, every slight, every moment of your enabling silence when your family decided to use me as their punching bag." Her face hardened. "Oh, this is ridiculous. You're being overly sensitive." "Am I?" he asked, his voice still unnervingly calm. He didn't open the journal. He didn't need to. It was all seared into his memory. "Let's review the data. Let's start with the dinner 2 weeks ago. Your brother offered me a pity job, and your father informed me that pride is a luxury I can't afford. And you, Elena, you said nothing. You just stared at your plate, ashamed of me." He leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. "Then there was the cocktail party. Mr. Henderson offered to get me a job financing car loans. And you weren't angry at him for the insult. You were furious with me for being the object of his pity. Your exact words were, 'Do you have any idea what you're reducing me to?' You saw my supposed failure as a reflection on you, a stain on your reputation." He straightened up, his gaze unwavering. "And tonight was the final entry. A failing asset, financial hygiene. You weren't planning the end of a marriage, Elena. You were planning a corporate divestment. You were liquidating a position that was no longer profitable." She stared at him, speechless. He was using their language, the cold, transactional vocabulary of her world, and turning it back on her like a mirror. "You and your family," he continued, his voice dropping even lower, drawing her in. "You have one fundamental flaw. You judge everything by its surface. You saw a mid-level analyst and you assumed that was the full measure of the man. You never thought to dig deeper. You never thought to ask, what else does he do?" He paused, letting the question hang in the air. This was the moment, the pivot on which their entire world was about to turn. "You were worried about our lifestyle," he said softly. "You were worried I couldn't provide you with the standard of living to which you're accustomed. So let's talk about that standard of living. Let's talk about this house, the art on the walls, the cars in the garage, the membership at the country club. Where do you think that money came from, Elena? From the salary of a mid-level analyst?" A flicker of confusion, of dawning, terrifying uncertainty appeared in her eyes. "Your investments, you said you were lucky in the market." "Lucky?" He let out a short, sharp laugh, devoid of all humor. "Luck is the lazy man's explanation for strategy. I'm not lucky. I'm a strategist. It's what I do. It's who I am." He reached into his pocket again, but this time he pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times and then slid it across the desk towards her. On the screen was the homepage of a website. It was sleek, minimalist, and powerful. At the top, in elegant font, were the words, Orion Strategy. Below it, a headline, Orion Strategy finalizes landmark acquisition of Sterling Preston Financial. Elena's eyes widened in disbelief. She looked from the phone to Liam, her mind struggling to process the information. Sterling Preston, that's Julian's bank. What is this? What is Orion Strategy? Orion Strategy, Liam said, his voice as cold and clear as a winter morning, is my company. I founded it 6 years ago with my partner, David Chen. The job you thought I had? The one you were so embarrassed by? That was a consulting gig, a side project to keep me grounded. My real work is this. He gestured to the phone. And yes, he continued, that is your brother's bank. Or rather, it was your brother's bank. As of 5 o'clock this afternoon, Orion Strategy owns a 54% controlling interest, which means, as of this moment, I own it. The silence that followed was absolute. The color had completely drained from Elena's face, leaving it a waxy, translucent white. She looked as though she had seen a ghost, as though the man standing in front of her had shed his skin and revealed an entirely different being underneath. The world as she knew it, the rigid hierarchy of status and power she had built her life upon, had just been inverted. The man she was planning to discard as a worthless asset had just become the most powerful person she knew. No, she whispered. It was not a denial, but a plea for reality to reassert itself in the way she understood it. That's not possible. Is it not? Liam's voice was relentless. You think your family is powerful? Your father builds things, Elena. Your brother sells things. I own things. There's a difference. He picked up his phone and made a call. He put it on speaker, the sound echoing in the tomb-like silence of the study. David, he said. Liam, David Chen's voice came through, crisp and clear. Perfect timing. The ink is dry. Sterling Preston is ours. The board folded completely. They were relieved to be saved from their own incompetence. And the leadership transition plan? Liam asked, his eyes locked on Elena's. Ready to execute on your command. The press release goes out at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We'll announce the acquisition and the immediate appointment of a new executive board. Julian Preston's termination papers are already drawn up, citing gross mismanagement and financial irregularities uncovered during our due diligence. Elena made a small choking sound. Her hand flew to her mouth. Julian, her arrogant, condescending brother, was about to be fired by her husband, the husband he had pitied and mocked. Thank you, David, Liam said. I'll see you in the morning. He ended the call and placed the phone back on the desk. The dam of Elena's composure finally broke. The shock gave way to a desperate, panicked scramble to undo the damage. The mask of the cold strategist fell away, replaced by the pleading face of someone who had just lost everything and knew it. Liam, she began, her voice trembling. She stood up, rounding the desk as if to close the physical distance between them. Liam, I didn't know. That's the point, Elena, he said, taking a step back, denying her the proximity she sought. You didn't know because you never cared to know. You never saw me. You saw a reflection of your own ambitions and fears. You saw a provider, and when you thought the provisions were gone, you were ready to get rid of him. No, that's not true, she cried, tears now streaming down her face. But they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of panic. I love you. I was just scared, confused. My family, they got in my head. Love? He repeated the word as if it were a foreign object he was examining for the first time. Love doesn't hold a person in contempt. Love doesn't stand by silently while they're being humiliated. Love doesn't consult a divorce lawyer to discuss financial hygiene. What you call love, Elena, is a partnership of convenience. And for you, it has just become profoundly inconvenient. Her pleading intensified. We can fix this, Liam. Please. I'm so sorry. I'll talk to my family. I'll tell them. I'll do anything." He looked at her, at this woman who was a stranger to him, and felt a deep, hollow sadness. She still didn't get it. She wasn't apologizing for her actions, for her lack of faith, for her cruelty. She was apologizing because the power dynamics had shifted. She was begging for a place on the winning team. "There is nothing to fix," he said, his voice final. "You showed me exactly who you are when you thought I had nothing. You can't unsay those words to your lawyer. You can't unfeel that shame you felt at the party. You can't undo 3 years of looking down on me while I was quietly building an empire that could swallow your family's legacy whole." He turned and walked towards the door. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice laced with desperation. "I'm going to a hotel," he said without turning back. "My lawyers will be in touch with yours in the morning, though I suspect you may want to retain new counsel. Mine are considerably better." He paused at the door and looked back at her, a crumpled, weeping figure in a room full of expensive things that no longer mattered. "By the way," he added, his voice devoid of all malice, a simple statement of fact. "The house, it's in my name. It was bought with funds from Orion Strategy, earned long before our wedding day. It's a premarital asset. Your father's ironclad prenup works both ways. The house is mine. You have 1 week to vacate." He stepped out of the study and closed the door behind him, the click of the latch echoing like a final judgment. The test was over. The marriage was over, and his new life was just beginning. As Liam was checking into a penthouse suite at the Four Seasons, a suite he owned a partial stake in through one of Orion's many real estate ventures, his phone buzzed. It was Elena. He ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. A string of panicked texts followed. "Liam, please, we have to talk. Don't do this. I love you." He deleted them without reading past the first few words. An hour later, another call came, this time from a number he recognized with a sinking feeling. Marcus Preston. He let it go to voicemail. He knew what was coming. Elena, in her terror, would have called her father, the family's patriarch and fixer, the man who believed any problem could be solved with intimidation and money. Liam showered, the hot water washing away the sterile chill of his former home. He put on a fresh shirt and poured himself a glass of scotch, walking to the vast, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering city. His city. He saw the sterling Preston Tower, its lights still blazing, and felt not triumph, but a quiet, somber sense of finality. He was right. The Prestons did not wait. Less than 2 hours after he had left the house, the concierge called up to his suite. "Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there is a Marcus, Beatrice, and Julian Preston in the lobby. They are insisting on seeing you." Liam felt a weary resignation. Of course, they couldn't let a night pass. They had to try and reassert their dominance immediately. "Send them up," Liam said. He finished his scotch and was standing by the window when the elevator chimed and the door to his suite opened. Marcus strode in first, his face a thundercloud of fury. Julian followed, his expression a mixture of arrogance and confusion. Beatrice trailed behind them, her face a mask of pinched disapproval. They stopped short when they saw the opulence of the suite, their eyes taking in the space, the view, the sheer scale of the luxury. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Marcus's face before he suppressed it. "What is the meaning of this, Liam?" Marcus boomed, his voice accustomed to commanding boardrooms. "Elena called us, hysterical. You walk out on your wife, you threaten her, and then you check into this?" He gestured around the room, the question hanging in the air. "How can you afford this?" "I didn't threaten your daughter, Marcus," Liam said calmly, turning from the window to face them. "I told her the truth. It's something your family seems to have a difficult time with." "The truth?" Julian sneered, stepping forward. "What truth? That you couldn't handle the pressure and decided to have a breakdown? I knew you were weak. I told Elena from the start." Liam looked at Julian, a man whose career was hours away from imploding, and felt a sliver of pity. You should be careful what you say to me, Julian. The dynamic of our relationship has changed. Don't you take that tone with my son, Beatrice snapped, finding her voice. After all we've done for you, we welcomed you into our family. You tolerated me, Liam corrected her, his voice still quiet, yet it silenced the room. You tolerated me as long as I was a suitable, if uninspired provider for Elena. The moment that appeared to be in jeopardy, you and your children treated me with a level of contempt I wouldn't show to a stranger on the street. He walked over to the bar and placed his empty glass down. I'm not going to rehash the litany of your insults. I'm tired, but you came here demanding answers, so I will give them to you. He looked directly at Marcus. For 3 years, you've lectured me on ambition. You've dismissed my career. You've treated me like a child playing at business. All the while, the company I built from nothing has grown into a financial powerhouse that, as of today, could buy and sell your entire legacy 3 times over without noticing the expense. Marcus's face, which had been red with anger, was slowly turning a pale, ashen gray. He was a shark who had just realized he was in a tank with a blue whale. Liam then turned his gaze to Julian. And you pitied me. You mocked me. You offered me a junior-level job at your bank out of some twisted sense of charity. You talked about being a protected asset. Well, as it turns out, your bank was a failing asset. And my company, Orion Strategy, just acquired it. I am, for all intents and purposes, your new boss. Julian staggered back as if he'd been physically struck. You're lying. Am I? Liam's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen. It was an alert from a financial news service. It seems the story broke early. Check your phones. It should be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal's website by now. Marcus fumbled for his phone, his hands trembling slightly. Julian and Beatrice did the same. The silence in the suite was absolute, broken only by the frantic tapping on glass screens. Liam watched their faces as they read the headline. Enigmatic firm Orion Strategy acquires Sterling Preston Financial in hostile takeover. Leadership shakeup imminent. The article named the founders of Orion, David Chen and Liam Sterling. The phones clattered from their hands onto the plush carpet. 3 faces, once so full of arrogance and certainty, were now portraits of utter devastation. As for you, Julian, Liam continued, his voice leaving no room for argument, my partner has already drawn up your termination papers. But I've decided to be generous. Report to my office, the main office, on the 48th floor of the Orion Tower at 9 a.m. Monday. We'll have a conversation about your future, or lack thereof. Perhaps you can get that job at the car dealership after all. He had thrown their own words, their own insults, back at them. He had used their own standards of success and failure to completely dismantle their world. Marcus, the great titan, looked broken. He sank into a chair, his face in his hands. Beatrice was weeping silently, her carefully applied makeup beginning to run. Julian just stood there, his mouth agape, his smug world shattered into a million pieces. You did this? To get back at us? Marcus whispered from behind his hands. No, Liam said, and his voice was laced with a profound sadness. You have to understand, this was never about you. Orion's acquisition of your bank was a sound business decision, one we've been working on for months. It was just a terrible, poetic coincidence that the family who looked down on me for my job was the same family whose company I was in the process of buying. He looked at the 3 of them, these powerful people now rendered small and helpless in his suite. I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourselves. Your arrogance, your obsession with status, your condescension, it made you blind. You were so busy looking down on me that you never saw me rising above you. Now I think this conversation is over. Please see yourselves out. He turned his back on them and walked back to the window, a clear act of dismissal. He heard shuffling, whispers, a sob from Beatrice. He did not turn around. He listened as the door opened and closed, leaving him alone once more in the quiet luxury of his new life. The reversal of fortune was complete. The humiliated had become the powerful, and the powerful had been brought low, not by cruelty or revenge, but by the simple, unimpeachable weight of the truth. The days that followed were a blur of seismic shifts, both personal and professional. Liam moved with a speed and decisiveness that left the Prestons reeling. On Monday morning, he had his legal team send an official notice to Elena, giving her 7 days to vacate the house. The locks were changed the following week. The art, the furniture, the life she had built, it was all packed up and put into storage, her possessions separated from his with the clinical precision of an auditor. At the Orion Tower, the transition was just as swift. Julian Preston did not show up for the 9 a.m. meeting. He sent a one-line resignation email instead, a final, futile act of defiance. It didn't matter. Liam and David had already uncovered a trove of financial misconduct during their due diligence. Julian's performance reports were works of fiction. His celebrated investment fund, a Ponzi scheme in all but name, using new investor money to pay off old ones. Orion's strategy quietly turned the evidence over to the SEC. Julian's fall from grace would not just be professional, it would be legal. His arrogance had not just cost him his job, but his freedom. The fallout for Marcus was just as devastating. The spectacular collapse and hostile takeover of his son's bank, coupled with the impending scandal, was a stain on the Preston name that even his immense wealth couldn't wipe away. Business partners grew distant. Old friends stopped returning his calls. The foundation of his power, his reputation, had been fractured. In the world he inhabited, the perception of weakness was a fatal wound. He was a king who had been publicly dethroned by the court jester, and his authority was irrevocably compromised. Liam, for his part, took no joy in their destruction. He felt a strange emptiness as he watched the consequences of their actions unfold. His goal had never been to ruin them, but to free himself. Their ruin was simply a byproduct of their own hubris. He immersed himself in his work, restructuring Sterling Preston, saving thousands of jobs, and stabilizing the company. His name, once a secret, was now on the lips of everyone in the financial world. He was lauded as a visionary, a genius. But at night, alone in his penthouse, the silence was a heavy blanket. A few weeks after he had left, he received a letter. It was not from a lawyer. It was a handwritten note on simple stationery from Elena. He almost threw it away, but something made him open it. The handwriting was shaky, completely unlike her usual elegant script. "Liam," it began, "I don't expect you to read this, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I'm writing because I need to say it for myself. You were right. About everything. I was a coward and a fool, blinded by the world I was raised in. I looked at you and I didn't see a man. I saw a status symbol. And when I thought that status was gone, I panicked. I chose my family's approval over my husband's heart. It is the great defining mistake of my life. These last few weeks, living in a small apartment my mother rented for me, with nothing that defines me as a Preston, I've been forced to look at myself for the first time. The person I see is ugly. She is shallow and cruel and empty. I destroyed the one real and good thing in my life because I was too weak to stand up to my family and too arrogant to see the incredible man who was standing right in front of me. I am not asking you to take me back. I know that is impossible. I am not the woman you deserve. I just wanted to say, for what little it's worth, that I am sorry. Not sorry that I lost the money or the house or the status. I am sorry for what I did to you. I am sorry for the pain I caused. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me, not for my sake, but for yours, so you can move on from the damage I inflicted." Elena Liam read the letter twice. It was the first time he had heard her voice, her true voice, since they had met. There was no manipulation in it, no hidden agenda. It was the raw, painful confession of a woman who had hit rock bottom and was only now beginning to see the world, and herself, clearly. It was her choice, the one he had wondered about. She hadn't tried to claw back her status. She had let it go and was facing the much harder task of finding her integrity. For the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of the love he once had for her. Not for the woman she was, but for the woman she might one day become. He folded the letter and put it away. Forgiveness was a complex terrain, one he wasn't ready to navigate yet. But for the first time, he saw a path through it. The months that followed were a period of quiet reconstruction for everyone. Liam solidified his control over his new, larger empire. But he did it with a quiet humility that earned him the respect of his employees and rivals alike. He wasn't a shark like Marcus or a peacock like Julian. He was an architect, building things meant to last. He found a new rhythm to his life, one that was not defined by secrecy or the need to prove himself. He was simply himself, and that was enough. He heard through the grapevine that the Preston family was fracturing. Marcus and Beatrice's marriage was strained to the breaking point. The SEC investigation into Julian was proceeding, and a trial seemed inevitable. They had lost their power, their status, and now they were losing each other. Their world, built on the fragile stilts of appearance and arrogance, had crumbled to dust. 6 months after he had walked out of the study, Liam agreed to meet Elena, not in a fancy restaurant or a sterile office, but in a quiet public park on a sunny afternoon. He saw her before she saw him. She was sitting on a bench, dressed in simple jeans and a sweater. She looked smaller, her posture less perfect. The defensive lacquer of the Preston name was gone. She looked like a normal person, burdened by regret. He sat down on the other end of the bench. She looked up, and her eyes held no artifice, only a deep, weary sadness. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice soft. "Your letter was honest," he replied. "It deserved a response in person." They sat in silence for a few moments, watching children play on a nearby lawn. "My brother's trial starts next month," she said, not looking at him. "My father has spent millions on lawyers, but it doesn't look good. My parents barely speak. The house, the big one, is for sale." "I'm sorry to hear that," Liam said, and he meant it. "Are you?" she asked, finally turning to him. "After everything they did?" "I'm not sorry for the consequences of their actions," he clarified. "They earned those. I'm sorry for the pain. I'm sorry that a family has been broken. I never wanted that." She gave a small, sad smile. "You have more grace than any of us ever deserved." She took a deep breath. "I'm not here to ask for anything, Liam. I needed to see you one more time, to tell you in person that I'm sorry, and to tell you that in a strange way, you set me free. I was suffocating in that life, and I didn't even know it. I was becoming a person I hated, and it took losing everything to see that." He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth in her eyes. She was no longer the antagonist in his story. She was just a woman trying to find her way back to herself. "I forgive you, Elena," he said, and the words felt right. They weren't a promise of reconciliation, but an act of release for both of them. "I forgive you because holding on to that anger only hurts me. We were wrong for each other, caught in a world that was toxic and unsustainable. I hope you find your own path. I hope you find happiness." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "Thank you, Liam," she whispered. "That's more than I could have hoped for." He stood up. "Goodbye, Elena." "Goodbye, Liam." He walked away without looking back, the sun warm on his face. The story was over. The great dramatic arc of humiliation and vindication had resolved into a quiet, sunlit afternoon in a park. He hadn't just won, he had grown. He had learned that true strength wasn't in hidden wealth or secret power, but in the courage to maintain your integrity in the face of disrespect, and the grace to offer forgiveness when it was least deserved. The pain had been immense, but it had forged him into a better man. He was free, not just from a bad marriage, but from the need to hide. He was whole. And as he walked out of the park and back into the city that was now truly his, he felt a sense of peace that was more valuable than anything Orion's strategy could ever acquire. It was the quiet, unshakable wealth of a man who knew his own worth, a worth that could never be measured on a balance sheet or judged by the ignorant. It was the worth of his character, and it was, at last, the only currency that mattered. What a journey! It really goes to show you that a person's true character is revealed not when things are going well, but when they face adversity. Liam kept his dignity, and Elena, in losing everything, finally found the path to hers. It's a powerful lesson. True worth is about who you are, not what you have. Arrogance builds a beautiful house, but integrity builds a foundation that can never be shaken. What do you think? Did Elena deserve the forgiveness Liam gave her? Would you have been as gracious, or would you have let them face the consequences without a second thought? I'd love to read your perspective in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see how different people view the complex morals of a story like this. Thank you for joining me for this story. If it resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more tales of justice, redemption, and the enduring power of integrity. We have many more stories to tell, and we'd love for you to be a part of our community. Until next time, remember to value the people in your life who see you for who you truly are, not for what they think you can give them.